With a career spanning 5 decades, he's become a world-famous pop star, appealing to fans all over the world. Of course, we're talking about the one and only piano man, Elton John, whose life is chronicled in a new biography. It's called Elton John, The Bitch is Back. Biographer Mark Bego joins us now to tell us all about it and give us the scoop. Great to see you, Mark.
Good to see you as well.
Is it true you interviewed a pretty interesting, a unique cluster of people to get the goods on Elton John?
That was part of the fun for me, as I investigated a lot of people from his past that a lot of biographers have never talked to. I spoke to Sarah Dash from LaBelle. She and Patti LaBelle and Nona Hendrix were LaBelle, Patti LaBelle and the Bluebells. They had the 22-year-old Elton John, Reg DeWhite back then, as their piano player for a tour of England in 1966. I talked to Angela Bowie, David Bowie's ex-wife, and she told me about meeting Reg DeWhite when he was a struggling songwriter. Reginald DeWhite.
Reginald DeWhite. That's Elton John's
That is not a rock star name at all, is it?
Reginald DeWhite.
Yes, isn't that an odd name? So he always felt like he wasn't going to be a rock star, so he decided to adopt the name Elton John.
Any idea where that name came from?
It came from two of his favorite musicians. There were blues musicians that he was touring with Long John Baldry in the 60s. He took Elton from Elton Dean, and he took John from Long John Baldry and became Elton John.
Very, very interesting scoop, I must say. Was it hard to get access to this cluster of people?
Well, you know what was nice is one led to the next. A lot of my friends in the music business said, oh, you got to talk to so-and-so. I would talk to Danny Hutton and Jimmy Greenspoon from Three Dog Night. A lot of people don't realize that Three Dog Night recorded the very first Elton John song that was released in America, Lady Samantha, in the 60s, and really kind of set the stage for Elton in 1970 to really burst forward.
Have you met Elton?
I have. I met him
Reggie?
in the 80s. Actually, well, he was Elton then, actually.
Okay.
I went backstage with Andy Warhol in the 80s.
Get out of here. That's
yes,
amazing.
it was a lot of fun.
That's a book in itself.
Oh, yeah, I had a lot of fun in the 80s, let me tell you.
I bet.
But I went backstage at Madison Square Garden to meet Elton. He was very nice and very friendly, and that was the night I'll always remember because he came on stage for the encore dressed as Tina Turner.
Really? That is unforgettable.
That is unforgettable indeed.
Is it true that he had a battle with his father growing up?
He did. You know, this is very interesting because he's wanting to adopt this baby. This has been what he's been in the papers about this fall. Yet he never really resolved his resentment towards his father. His father told him not to get in the music business, get a nice, decent job at a bank and what have you. And Elton did reconcile with him in the 70s, and then they had another rift. And you see Elton, you know, playing piano at the funerals of friends or rushing to the side of people in need, yet he couldn't ever reconcile his relationship with his biological father, which I think is kind of odd and interesting.
Yeah, and speaking of which, let's talk about his sexuality. Obviously, you might say he struggled with his sexuality. He was straight, or he was bi, then he was straight, then he wasn't, then he was gay.
Exactly. And his whole reputation in the very beginning was to be, you know, very nice ballads and what have you. His concerts were concerts that families could go to. You go, there'd be a father and a mother and their kids at an Elton John concert. So he was really worried about revealing his sexuality. But then Rolling Stone magazine especially chased him around and wanted him to admit what was really going on in his life. So he finally, in 1976, admitted to being bisexual. Then in the 80s, we saw him marry one of the recording engineers that he'd met, Renata Blawell. And we were like, what is up with this? We thought he was, you know, bisexual, really kind of gay. Well, then he finally came to terms with his sexuality in the 90s after he gave up all the drugs, and there were a lot of drugs.
I'm glad you mentioned that. Let's talk about the drug use. Is it true he was about 15 years? He was into drugs?
Absolutely. It started in the 60s, or 70s, I should say, the 70s, and he had all this money. Cocaine was really making an entrance into the music business. No one really had cocaine problems, and with all the money that he had, he started doing bags and bags of cocaine. One of the most interesting things I talked about with people who were at some of his parties, it would be a coffee table with a mound of cocaine on it.
Really?
And he really had a problem, and he really kind of buried himself from reality in the cocaine. So in 1990, when he finally gave it up, he really kind of blossomed into his own self and was comfortable in his own skin, I should say.
And during that period, the extreme drug use, did his career suffer, or did he have some of his
Well,
best
he
hits?
had a lot of roller coaster dips in his career. Of course, he had such an incredible run in the 70s, all those #1 albums, all those huge million sellers. Then he and Bernie Taupin, his songwriter, kind of split up about 1979, and he started experimenting with other songwriters, and it wasn't quite as successful for him. Then he had the song "I'm Still Standing" and really
Love
proved
it.
that he was. That's such an iconic song
One of those
for him.
songs you hear
It
and
really
you
just
just-
fits
yeah.
him so perfectly. Then in the late 80s, he was still doing a lot of drugs, and he claims that that is his low point in his career. And then after the 90s, he was kind of worried about going in the studio and going on stage not with drugs in his system.
I could imagine.
You know, it was like
Yeah.
stymied. He was like, I haven't been sober on stage in
Yeah.
years.
What surprised you most when writing this book?
Well, the fact that he is kind of a dichotomy. He's someone who all his friends say he's so easy to get along with, yet he throws these wild tantrums, picks
And
fights.
wild parties,
Oh,
too.
yes, and wild parties,
Maybe,
too.
hopefully not at the same time, but
Yeah, exactly. Well, now he's famous for more tame parties, like his Oscar party he does every year.
True.
So he's gotten out of the cocaine, but he's retained his love of the parties.
and why write this now?
Well, there really hasn't been a book in a while that tells everything and sheds so many different sides, or so many lights on the different sides of Elton John. He's a book, this is a book, I should say, and a subject I wanted to write about for years. I first wrote about Elton John in the 70s for my college newspapers when Don't Shoot Me, I'm Only the Piano Player came out. So I guess you could say for me it's a 4-decade research project.
5 seconds, favorite Elton John song?
All the Young Girls Love Alice.
Oh, good one. Good
Love
one.
that
I'm
one.
going with I'm Still Standing.
Okay.
Mark, great to see you. Good luck
Great
with the
to
book.
see you as well.
All right. It's called Elton John, The Bitch is Back. It's available online and at bookstores everywhere. Go get it. That's all the buzz we have for you today.